These are the team's objectives for today's webinar. 1, we will discuss how steps and tasks can support the district's process. 2, we will discuss how to apply scoring options to support various needs. 3, we will understand the district system for capturing student growth scores. 4, we will explore correlation between student growth scores and evaluation data. And 5, we will identify reporting needs and how to run those reports. Now let's take a look at the agenda for today. 1, we will build a weighted evaluation process to address district initiatives and needs such as TIA. 2, we will import and manage student growth data from multiple sources. 3, we will analyze data and trends in the evaluation process and how they align with student growth. And 4, we will pool and prepare data for TIA submission. And with that, I would like to send it over to Shanna to get us started. Shanna, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. That was so clear, and I appreciate an opening like that. So we are going to talk about this weighted evaluation process. So what does that mean? Okay, so we have a new thing now, that some additions that we've made to our evaluation process. But before we get there, I want to make sure that we talk about the setting up and the importance of setting up your evaluation process. The key to a successful TIA implementation with Strive is setting this process up. And we've made a lot of efforts over the past few years to build tools that help support you in your TIA process and general appraisal needs. So like all of our analysis tools that we've built, the activity tracker, the summative panel, our new student growth feature that we're going to talk about today, and the custom reporting that we've put out there for TIA reports. All of those things pretty much start with, and at the center of them are the evaluation process. So making sure this is your absolute first step in being successful with TIA is making sure that you have this set up correctly. And not only that, revisiting it every year. So in the summer, now's a great time. You want to go back in and revisit your process. You might want to have conversations with your appraisers that used the documents over the year, get feedback from them. Is there anything that's out of place or whatever? But now's the time to gather that information. So you want to make sure you have the framework connected, you make sure you have those right documents connected. And not only that, you want to make sure you're updating those due dates and your requirements if you want to make changes to that. So if you are not setting due dates in your evaluation process, this is a perfect example of how this will impact the users, your appraiser's activity. They get to see that status when they log in to their Strive, their overview page. That automatically tells them if there's action that they need to take, if there's things that overdue or that they need to take care of. So again, these due dates are directly related to that. So that's really important to make sure you're updating that. Another thing I want to call out is the frameworks and the new frameworks that we have out there. So if you are implementing the new framework that they released for the alternative domain 1, there are definitely some steps that you need to take to set that up this summer. The good news is Paige and her team have made it super easy for you to do that. You do have the framework installed, and then at the bottom of this slide, and you'll get a copy of this presentation at the end, and the links will be viable. You can actually click that link and it'll take you to a streamlined page of here's how you would set up your t-test Alt D1 or your regular t-test. It talks about the updates that we released with the locked frameworks and why you would want to use that and everything. So I would highly recommend that you take a look at that when you receive the presentation, if you are planning to change that. All right, so now to the meat of what we want to talk about, the next slide. We're going to talk about the updates to the evaluation process. So one very, very important thing we have added now that will be a huge add for your TIA reporting is the scoring tab. So in your appraisee type setup, after you've gone through, set all of your evaluation process, all the steps and tasks and documents that you need, you're going to want to click on the scoring tab, and you're going to set your weights for your evaluation process. So on the next slide, after you click on it, you'll see this is where you're going to align whatever your submission to the TEA is, however you, for your TIA application, the weighting that you selected or submitted that you were going to do. This is how you can align that within Strive. So from here, you'll select your appraisal data from the drop-down. These documents have to be in your evaluation process. So that's why you want to set that up first. And right now you have the option of choosing either an observation or a summative document. It's a single document right now, but I do want to say we are exploring options for multiple documents, being able to weight those and put those in there. So that, look for that to come in the future. But for now, you can choose either or. And then the next thing that you'll do to set up your scoring formula is you'll plug those weights in there. So depending on what you said, you could do a 50-50. It has to equal 100. So however, if you decided you were going to do appraisal data at 60%, student growth at 20%, and maybe you wanted an other as a 20%, you would put that here. Now let's talk about the other that we're referring to. This is if you are planning on using something like parent surveys, or maybe you want to do student surveys, if you have a professional learning event that you're going to offer and give credit to teachers and use that as a score. The big caveat here is this other, the only thing you're going to do is put the percentage for the weight of that specific category. We are not right now able to import any other data into this scoring formula. You're just going to put the formula there. So we're not bringing anything into Strive. This is data that lives outside of Strive. When you run your TIA, your custom TIA report that Paige is going to share with you in a minute, when you run that report, you're going to have a blank column that says other, and you're going to put that data in after the fact. The good news is the calculations are already there. So whatever weight you put there, it will still calculate in your spreadsheet for you. So I just wanted to call that out. Now, will there be a way, in the future, or we're also exploring options? We're continually looking at ways we can help improve this process and make it easier. All right. So now notice that I talked about appraisal data. You selected that. Then I talked about how the other data was going to get there. Nope, you're fine, Paige. You can go on. Managing, this is what we're going to talk about, how that student growth data is going to get there in that report. All right. So we released recently a new feature to manage student growth. At the moment, it is a district level right. So that what that means is you can apply the right to manage appraisal settings, which includes the manage student growth, and that will give someone the ability to manage student growth in mass. Okay, we're talking about one person at the whole district could do it. That's not ideal, especially if you have a huge district. Right now, that is how it works. We are adding the ability for appraisers to manage their own appraisee student growth scores within this process. And we are also looking at automation options too. So let's jump in and I'll show you how you would be able to manage the growth. The first option is to enter it manually. So from this, again, you'll just click and you'll add your numbers into the space there. Again, this will equal 100. if you're only capturing met or didn't meet or whatever, you would just put a 0 in that other space, however that turns out. You can also use the filters to filter to schools. You could enter a specific staff member's name and filter to the specific appraisee type when you're entering this. So manually adding them, again, not ideal if you have a large district or whatever, but it is an option. This next option that you have is importing them from portfolios. So this works the same. If a teacher is using a student portfolio in Aware, you can click the button and import it from Aware. So again, this is not a mass operation. This would be kind of an individual one by one, mostly because if you'll see in that one screen, there are two portfolios to choose from. So knowing which portfolio to import is going to be imperative in this. So that's why appraisers are the ideal people to import those. And then, but the other option, again, that we're looking at is from the Aware side, setting some automations. Teachers would choose which portfolio goes towards their, or a teacher and appraiser would choose which one would go towards their student growth, and then that could automatically be imported in. But we do have to figure out a way to identify that on that portfolio end. All right. The next option is definitely been the most asked for option. It's the ability to import a spreadsheet with student growth. The nice thing about this is you can import everyone regardless of the score or the process that you use for collecting that student growth. If you're using an outside system, if you're just using spreadsheets and calculations, the nice thing is you can just import or upload that data in here. And there is, at the bottom of that window, there's an option to download the template. So if you don't want to have to figure out how to do the file, or, if you have issues with that, you could download the template and then plug the information in, and then that's what you could upload into the system, and it has everything laid out. So that one I think is going to be huge for especially larger districts that are doing multiple different ways to manage student growth. All right. So the next thing is the summative documents. So we did have the ability for appraisers to enter the information in summative documents, but the feedback we got from that was it was difficult because there are a lot of districts that are using star scores or other data that comes after the fact, and the need to close that summative out and have signatures signed off. We had a lot of districts that weren't taking advantage of being able to capture student growth that way. So we do have the ability now to include student growth in the summative document. So if you want to include it, if it exists in that table, it will show up and it will be a part of that file, which is very cool because then it's archived and it stays there. But it is not entered in the summative. The decision that we made, if you'll flip to the next slide there, is that we wanted to have one space where you are managing all of your student growth. This is your source of truth. If we had, appraisers entering it over here or something happening over here, then the question is, which one is right? So this table is the source of truth. And not only is this the main source of truth for entering the scores, this is where any reporting that we're using. So if you're running the reports that Paige is going to talk about here in a little bit, and student growth is a part of it, it is going to pull from this table, and you're not going to have to enter anything into those reports. It's going to automatically be there. Okay. Any questions about any
No
of
questions yet.
Okay. All right, then I'm going to pass it off to Paige and
All
let
right.
address her section.
Thank you very much. And we're going to talk about analyzing that data, things that you need to be looking for throughout the process. This is true whether you're a TIA district or not. If you're on this webinar because you're just sticking your toe in the water and you're not sure, this is all good stuff for right now, TIA or no TIA. We're going to talk about some ways that you can look at the data. Our detailed analysis is my favorite because it's dynamic. You can switch back and forth. Let me look at it like this. Let me look at it like that, and see all of the information that you want in one place. You have lots of filters, lots of ways that you can look at the data. So I'm actually going to jump into the system, and I'm looking at detailed analysis. We have all of these fields up here that you can use to make your decisions. I'm looking at t-test data. I'm looking at observations. I have a date range going in here. Mine's from a couple years ago because that's where I have the most data in my demo site. I've selected to view the dimensions. So that's what we're seeing in the columns here is the dimensions. And my rows are all my teachers. So right now I don't have them grouped. So I'm looking at all the teachers in my district, which for some districts might be overwhelming. For some districts, it might be fine. But why would I want to look at all of that in one place? Well, one of the things that this view is good for is like Jason Allen here, he's got some blanks. So either his appraiser didn't finish or his appraiser is going to do another one and this one needs to be deleted. I'm not sure, but I can see that there's a problem here and I can talk to that appraiser and get that corrected, get that document completed or get a new document done. And as I scroll down, I'll find a couple of others in here that are the same way. There's another one, only the first two were done. Here's one that only the last few are not done. So I can find those blanks in the whole district pile and kind of look for those things that are happening as they're going on so I don't have as much cleanup to do at the end. That's one way to look at the whole list. I might then want to say, well, let me look at my list, but I want to look at it by school. So now I can see all of my teachers, but they're separated by school. I can see how many documents have been done at each campus, and I can see what the averages are for those campuses. I might want to come down and say, well, I don't really need to see the individuals. This is the data I'm interested in. If I'm a district level person, maybe I want to see the schools and I'm just not going to group them. So I can look at my schools and these are the averages of all the documents. This is a great way for me to look for skew across my district. So are there some campuses that are significantly lower in some areas than others? Are there some campuses that are significantly higher? There may be a valid reason for that. There may be different populations, different teacher groups, but there also may be just not, the rubric is not being applied equally across the district. And this is one way that I can start to see that is how are we, looking at as a district, are we in line across the board? I can also look at individual appraisers and I can group those by school if I want to see within those school numbers, is that equally distributed among my appraisers? Is there skew between appraisers? So if I looked just at this column, I would say the page AP is the harder grader. The scores are a little bit lower in some of the areas than some of the others. So that may be something that concerns me. It may not be. If I come down here to Erica Kane, she is across the board higher than the others at her campus and higher than most people in her district. If you look at the averages across the district, she's higher than that. So I would want to dig a little deeper. Does she have all the veteran teachers at her school? And is that why she has higher scores? Or is she just good friends with everybody and she doesn't want to make anybody mad and she's not necessarily applying the rubric as much as interpreting the lessons? So I would want to look at that data and see, do we have skew between our evaluators? Do we need to do some calibration exercises to get everybody realigned? I could also look at that skew based on subjects. So I could come in and say, and I'm not going to group by school here. I'm just going to look at my subject areas. Do we have some subject areas that have higher ratings than others, lower ratings than others? What does that mean? Are we not applying the rubric as stringently for subjects that are not tested and we're being more diligent on those tested subjects? So we could look by subject and see, what's going on there. This also lets me see I've got 3 documents in here where the subject was not set. And that's going to be important when we start doing reports, because that subject area needs to be part of that report. So I could go dig a little deeper, click on the not sets. I can find out who those 3 people are. I can dig a little deeper and find out who their appraiser is, and go in and say, you need to go back in and get that taken care of so that everyone has a subject area. I could also look by grade level and see if we have different grade levels. If I'm doing grade levels, I might want to narrow it down to a specific area of schools. So I might want to say, well, first of all, I'll just look at one campus and look at the grade levels here. Secondary is harder to look at by grade level because there are so many mixed grade level classes. If I looked instead at one of my elementaries, oh, don't have any data for that elementary. I'm surprised. But if I looked at elementary, I would see a little more clearer data based on those grade levels. Really through 8th grade, it's pretty clear, but at high school, there's a lot of that right now I have some that are not set. There's also a category that says secondary that doesn't give you a specific grade level. I'm going to go back to my appraisees, and I'm going to look at by appraisers. I can, if I want to, narrow this down to just the TIA dimensions. Right now I'm looking at all of them, but I can use any of these filters here to say I want to look at just those dimensions that will be used for TIA, and I can kind of see how we're doing in those dimensions. Or if I want to look at the data that's going to be applied to TIA, what is that average of the 8 that's going to determine whether or not they're eligible? Then I could go in and say, instead of dimensions, just show me their totals, and it's going to give me that average that they have. Right now, it's the average of only the 8 because I'm applying that filter. So I'm only looking at 2.1 through 3.3 averaged together to give me this rating. So those are a lot of different views that you can see using detailed analysis. Again, as you can see, some of these are great for TIA. Some of these are just great for checking on your evaluation process and how equally it's being implemented across the board. One of the things that is new, and I'm going to jump over here to talk about it, and then I'll go back and show it to you. We now have saved filters in Strive. Yay! Those of you who have worked in Aware, you've seen the quick views and how you can save those and save your sets of data and go back and find them later. That's something that we just now have in Strive. It's not even a month old, but if you go in now to your system, anywhere that you are, I have this view that I'm looking at. I can come over here and there's a little bookmark icon. I can click on that and say I want to create one. So I want to save my current filter set. I'm going to call it totals for 2.1 through 3.3 by appraiser, because I've got them grouped by appraiser. So I've given it a name. I'm going to click the create button. So I go up here and I change some things. I'm looking at something different, and I've gone back and done all kinds of stuff, gotten rid of all my filters. I want to see that same data again. I can come over and look at my bookmarks. It's going to show me my list. I can say I want to see that one again, tell it okay, and it's going to apply those filters again and put me back where I was. So I can go back in and look at any of them. I have one set up here, observations by appraiser, and I can go in and look at that one. So my views will be there and I can return to them anytime I want to by clicking on that little bookmark. So that to me is a huge win, because there are several things that I want to see regularly. And I used to have to go in and do all of my settings every time I went in. Now I don't have to do that. I can save them and keep them over there in my little bookmark section. Any questions about the analysis or saving our views?
No questions that I can see at this moment, Paige.
All right, thank you. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about in terms of data is the teacher performance and student growth report. It's really analysis more than a report, because it is like the other, a dynamic thing that's going to pull in that data as of that moment. When you select the summative document that you want to use, it's going to pull the data. Each one of these dots represents a teacher. And if I was live, I could float my mouse over that teacher and see what their total is, what their average is, and also the average of their student growth of met and exceeded. It would be here in this report as well. So this is also going to pull that student growth data that Shanna talked about earlier into the summative, this report. Previously, you had to enter it in the summative document in order to have access to this report. And those of you who were using some sort of standardized testing that didn't come in time to put it in the summative didn't have access to this either. Now you will, because that data can go into the student growth management section and populate here, and it will give you the placement of the dot based on the students and the teachers. What I would expect to see is sort of a diagonal line clumped together, that the lower the teacher score, I would expect my student growth scores to also be lower. The higher my teacher scores, that stronger teacher, I would expect them to have helped their students achieve more and have higher student growth scores as well. If that's not the case, if I have outliers like this one here in the middle where the teacher rating is higher than the student rating, I would want to know, what does that mean? If the teacher is up at a little over 4.5, but the students are just barely over 50%, what's going on there? I would want to dig in a little bit deeper and try to find out. The same thing can happen over here where we've got students at the 90% level, but the teacher is only at a 1.5 average. How does that happen? So, and there could be a valid reason. A brand new teacher may have inherited a really high achieving group of students, but I would want to dig in a little bit deeper and see, is that student growth score correct? Are there other factors that are influencing these ratings? So when I'm live in the tool, I can click on any one of those dots and see more detail. And I can even click on the teacher and see their actual evaluation if I want to dig that deeply into what is the data that's leading into this particular view. So with the new student growth management that we have, it's going to be easier for all districts to have access to this report and to be able to monitor that correlation as the data is coming in.
Paige, we do have a question. Can these views be exported as a PDF document?
Not as a PDF document. Anything in detailed analysis, I can download here with this export button. It's going to export whatever I'm viewing, whatever filters I've applied, whatever I've narrowed it down to with all of my settings. It's going to export that into a spreadsheet. We also have a view other than the table, and I didn't mention the graph view, but we do have a graph view. And the graph view can be saved, so you can save a graph view, but it cannot be exported. So you'll only see these here in the system. If you want to export the data from a table, you can. What did I do weird? There we go. I can export those as a spreadsheet by using this button right here. I just like to remind people that then you're taking it out, and that's a snapshot in time. If somebody does another observation in the next 5 to 10 minutes, it's not going to be included in that data that you exported. So, you can export that and manipulate it further if you want to.
Thank you, Paige. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, but I was just going to say, for the student growth teacher correlation report, there's a table view that you can export, but not the scatter plot view.
Perfect. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you, Paige.
All right. Okay, so let's talk about preparing that data. And it says here for TIA, this report actually will help districts that are not participating in TIA. If you're thinking about it, if you're going into your preparation year, your application year, and you just want to start looking at the data, you can use this now. You don't have to be in the program to use this report, but it is going to help those districts prepare for TIA and get the data that they need. The first step is what Shanna talked about earlier, setting up your evaluation process, making sure you have all your tasks selected and templates selected, and then applying those weights. So you're going to go into that scoring tab like Shanna mentioned, and you're going to plug those numbers in. These averages are going to go into the new custom TIA report and give you the overall ratings. So you want to make sure you have that process set up first. Then when you go into the reports section, there are two reports now. One of them says legacy TIA and one of them says the custom TIA export. That's the new one that includes the weighted scoring. And so when you first go into the report, you're going to use a drop down to select the year that you're pulling data from. And then you're also going to select the appraisee type. This means that if you have multiple appraisee types that are all eligible for TIA, or you're all pulling them all into the report, you're going to have to pull that report for each type. That's one of the things to consider when you're setting up your process. What is the reason for having multiple appraisee types? Really, they only need to be a different appraisee type if they have a different process. So if they're all using the same evaluation process, they could be in the same type. You might be doing it for reporting purposes, but you might be able to report by groups rather than by appraisee type. So that's something to consider as you're setting up your process. You will pull each appraisee type into a separate report. If you get this message that says a formula or appraisee template has not been configured, you won't be able to do anything. You won't be able to download the report. Please contact an administrator in your district, and this may be you, and it may not be, but only the person who has the appraisal administrator role, person or people. Sometimes it's 3 to 5 per district. They're the only ones who can set the scoring formula. So if you see that message, you need to talk to your district people and say, hey, we need to go in and do some things that are new so that we have access to this additional information in the report. And then once that is set up, you will see the document. Once you've pulled your appraisee type, you'll see the data, the formulas that you set up, the document that you selected, and the percentages that you put in for your process, and how that's going to calculate. And then you can download that report. It's going to give you a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet will have all of the fields that are required in the TIA report, the data submission file. So there will be a place for you to have the teacher's ID number. There are actually 3 ID numbers that are required in TIA. And if you don't have all of them showing, you can, and I don't know if you're the person or not, but in the management application in Eduphoria, when I go to manage users and I go to import users, I can import all of this data into the system. So all 3 of the ID numbers that are required for TIA can be imported. And if they're imported into Eduphoria, then they'll show up in that TIA report. The middle name field is also in the TIA data file. It's not required, but if you just don't want to have any blanks, you could import the middle name. Same is true for date of birth. It's in their field, it's in their file, but it's not a required field. If you wanted to have it, you could import all of that information, and then when you run the TIA report, it will be there. So I would want to run this, make sure all of my data is in the system, and then when I go back over to Strive, and I go to my analysis and reports and come down to appraisal reports, this is where I'm going to see the custom TIA export, where I will pull my appraisee type, and it's going to show me for this current year using the locked template that we just released and using these percentages. That's what's going to calculate in my report that I run when I click download. Again, it'll have all of the fields that are required for TIA. Some of them will be in our system, like you can import the ID numbers in and they'll be in our system. All of the teacher ratings for the 8 dimensions will be there. These averages will be there. The appraiser's name will be there. What won't be there is whether or not the teacher's still employed with you and what group they're in from your application. Those are things that don't live in Eduphoria, and your district will have to add them to the file after the fact. But you will get all of that data. Again, you get it one appraisee type at a time. So if you're using multiple appraisee types, you would need to download those both and then merge the fields together. But they'll have all the same field headings. Everything will be the same. So that will be an easy combination. Any questions about the TIA reporting?
There was one question that came in. Are you going to show the report?
I can show, I don't know how much data is going to be in my demo site, but I can download this one. Actually, I'm going to pull an old one because I don't have any data in there. You know, I don't think I'm going to have, I'm not sure what is selected. I don't think I'm going to have good data here, but we will see. I have a few. This is what the report will look like. This is the spreadsheet. So I can come up here and make it a little bit more readable. You can see all of the fields. And if you download the spreadsheet from the TIA website, it has all of these same fields in there. I'm going to make it a little more readable. These are the 3 ID numbers that I was talking about earlier. If you have imported them into your system, because these are fake teachers in my district, they don't have 3 IDs. So I don't have that information in, and you may not in your district right now. If you ran this report, they may be blank. But if I ran that import, then they wouldn't be. Also, I don't have a campus number or a district number because I'm not a real district, but you would have your campus, county district campus number would be there for each one of your campuses, and your county district number would be there for your whole district. These are the fields that I said you still have to put in. They don't live in our system, whether or not they're part of one of the teacher groups from your application, whether or not they're still employed. Those are things that you would have to fill in. But the content area and grade level will come from the evaluation documents. That's why I said look for those not sets, because we want to make sure these were all not sets in my system. And so I don't have that data populating in. You could create a formula that calculates based on the content area, what is the PEIMS number that goes with that? What is the main service ID number? So that could be generated by a formula. And then the appraiser's name would be in there. And the appraiser's ID number would be part of that import. If you imported the ID numbers for your district, it would include the local ID numbers for the appraisers. So that would be populated. Then it's going to show the 8 dimensions that are calculated for TIA. And then we'll see those percentages, the appraisal percentage, the student growth percentage, and the final score.
And so one of the questions that came in, Paige, was, is it going to give the designation? Okay, and I see that Shanna answered that.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just saying that we had a conversation with the TEA, and they warned us against giving that because it could be misleading, because there are other factors, and really Texas Tech is the one that would determine those designations. So it does still exist in that legacy TIA report. We didn't take that away.
But it is just an estimate. It still has, the data still has to be validated by Texas Tech.
Okay.
Perfect. The process and all of that. So.
Okay, Paige, thank you for that. And with that, I would like to thank Shanna and Paige for hosting. On behalf of today's team and all of Eduphoria, we would like to thank you for joining us on today's webinar about using Strive for TIA success. Have a great day.